What is going on, Panthers Nation? Carolina Dad here, your host of the Two Growls, One Roar podcast. This is a lightning episode. I have my timer up. If you're watching the video, 16 minutes to get through this episode, which should be ample time. You know, when I go back and watch the NFL previews of the Panthers games at the beginning of the season, the NFL puts these clips on YouTube to get you prepared for the game, and they're 10 minutes or so. Last week's game preview was against Tampa Bay was about 3 minutes. And I feel like this week's preview is going to be even shorter. So if I cannot get you in a decent preview in 16 minutes, we got a problem. But hey, there's a positive reason why I'm doing this in 16 minutes. And that's because at the end of this at 8:30 Eastern, I'm going to be jumping on with the BS. Nope. I want to make sure I get it right. I'm jumping on with the Saints podcast. I was on with them earlier this year before the Saints game, BS and Beer Media. So they are a Saints podcast that have graciously invited me back for the preview of the Saints and Panthers. And as we talk Saints and Panthers, here we go. Carolina Panthers officially eliminated from the playoffs. 5 games to go. 5 games to go. And maybe if you're a casual fan, which, hopefully you are and you're not invested like me. But if you are, I don't know that, maybe the season's already done for you and you can, go about your business without having to watch this. But 1-11, but our division still open for New Orleans, for Tampa and Atlanta. So Atlanta's 6-6, Tampa's 5-7, New Orleans is 5-7. Going back to the first game, second game of the season, Monday Night Football, New Orleans moved to 2-0 after the win over the Panthers. 20-17. Bryce wasn't great, but we do know about the late game fumble that ended up kind of costing us the game there. Converted really late in the game, and at that we were down 20-9, and wasn't a lot going on for this team. And to be frank, there hasn't been a lot going on, and I shouldn't say frank. Rest easy, big brother. I know you're not here anymore. But to be frank, there has not been a lot going on at all for this team. Now, the New Orleans Saints, and I was trying to get it pulled up. I was listening to some of Dennis Allen today, their head coach, going through his presser, getting prepared. There is some developing news, so to speak. So if you're following along this week, stay in tune with what's happening with Derek Carr. He is in the concussion protocol. They did confirm that today. So he did have a concussion. Also, the ribs are being evaluated. But from what I've seen from the guys I follow here with the Saints podcast and a few others, they kind of joke that whether it's Jameis back there or Derek, and some may even prefer Jameis, that this game is probably still going to be close. And I do think it is another division game. You have the Panthers again, who have nothing to lose. And at this point, you're just trying to spoil your division rivals as you close out the year from being able to make the playoffs. And that's going to be the game plan moving forward. Chris Tabor, nothing to lose. I think he does, put all his chips in, which he has said all his chips are in. He's out here chopping wood, trying to have fun. And we did see a little bit of fun this past game. Got to hear the mic'd up Chuba Hubbard version that was just posted for Panther Social, hearing him. And when you talk about the key to winning this game or having a chance to win this game for the Carolina Panthers, it has to do with Chuba Hubbard. Getting him the ball. He eclipsed the 100 yards. Let's get him another 100 yards game. And let's keep Bryce Young under center, because a lot of good things happened when Bryce was under center. Saw the play development, the shots downfield. And just roll with it, take a few more shots and continue to utilize the motion. I looked back at the snap count. That was actually, one, got to see Amir Smith-Marset a little bit. That was Jonathan Mingo's best game of the year. And I know it gave him a little bit of grief coming into it. His best game, just keep feeding him the ball. Let's build that connection, because honestly, he may be the only wide receiver back on this roster next year, at least in the current state, because Adam Thielen showing signs of frustration in the locker room. If you haven't seen it, go out and look it up. But you can see that things are kind of boiling up with him. And he's just disappointed with how this turned out. But he can be disappointed all he wants. He's still getting his $9 to $10 million. And it would be a $9 million salary next year that we would have to part from if we wanted to get him out of here. And he's another year older. But then Terrace Marshall, who did not play last game, is the other wide receiver currently signed for the 2024 season. Now, there are a few guys like Laviska, like Amir, Strachan that can be re-signed as free agents. So we could still see some of these same guys, but at least what's on paper today, that's what you have. And talking about and then kind of going around a little bit, but talking about the construction of this team heading into next year, I was just going back to look at free agent signings from the past offseason just to analyze how many teams are having to rebuild and how many transactions they're making. And what I saw going through that is that there were teams like us and the Texans and a few others that had like 20 plus transactions during the offseason. And then some more established teams like the Ravens and Chiefs that had like 8 or 9 because they are able to develop in the draft and could be just a time when they don't have a lot of guys to re-sign during the free agency period. But enough of that. Now, for me, over these next few weeks, it is going to be an opportunity for me to start focusing on the draft, what little draft stock we have, focusing on free agency, and really just sitting down for me thinking about like, what is this going to look like? Who's our next coach going to be? All the question marks that surround this team. Now, the New Orleans Saints have lost 3 in a row, but doesn't mean anything, folks. It does not mean a thing when you're playing the Panthers. So they've lost to the Vikings, pretty good team, division rival Falcons, and the Detroit Lions. And Detroit got up really big last game. And I remember seeing the score and they jumped out. I think it was like 21-0. They battled back. We know Derek got hurt and then Jameis comes in, but they ended up making that a 33-28 score game. So it was pretty close or closer than you would think. And I look at the other losses that the Saints have had this year to some decent teams. You've got Green Bay, very close game, Texans, and the Jags. So like they've lost, 7? But at the same time, still a decent team. And we know their defense is solid. And getting into some of the numbers, kind of again, abbreviated session here. After that 18-point performance last week, the Panthers' points per game creeped up from 15.7 to 15.9. Let's go. 29th in the league. New Orleans averaging about 21.3, which puts them right in the middle of the pack, ranked 16th. Yards per game, they're right there at 15th with 322. And Carolina's putting them about 267 yards per game. Bryce Young needs to average, I believe, around 189 yards over the last 5 games to eclipse the 3,000-yard passing mark. That would put him about 17th in Panthers history for most passing yards in a single season. Yes, 17th. Not what I expected, far below Cam Newton's rookie season. But as we've seen with what's around him right now, I think that's just what to expect and what this is. On the defensive side of the ball for the New Orleans Saints. So putting up, I should say, their offense is putting up about 348 yards per game, which is 11th in the league. So pretty decent offense. We know they got Taysom Hill, who runs like, it just drives me insane. I want him to be gone just as much as I want Mike Evans to be gone because he is the Swiss Army tool that they can utilize. So I get him up out of here. They've also got Alvin Kamara back, who was not in the original game that we had. And then, you look at Chris Olave, Michael Thomas, the depth on their skill positions is a much different situation than what we have here in Carolina. So this is a 1:00 kickoff on Sunday at New Orleans. New Orleans is a 5-point favorite. The total points, or over under, I should say, the total is 37.5 points, combined points between the two right now. If you want to bet the over under on this game at the Caesar Dome, it's so hard for me to call it the Caesar Dome. It's been Mercedes-Benz for me for, all my childhood and all of college football that played there. It's just weird knowing that that's not the name of it and that Atlanta has the Mercedes Dome when you figure there. Now, looking at their statistics this year, if we can get my computer to load, I wanted to quickly highlight what we've seen out of the New Orleans Saints. So pretty good year for Derek Carr, not great. I saw a GoFundMe to buy out Derek Carr's $55 million contract. Like, good for y'all, New Orleans. There's frustration all around the league, man. Going from the New Orleans pressers last week or this week, the Tampa Bay pressers, like the pressure across the league is there, and you hear it. And I don't know which player it was, but apparently when Derek Carr gets hurt, a Saints player was tweeting out about the injury during the game. That was addressed in the presser that I heard from Allen this past week, and not a lot of comments there. I think the Twitter was taken down, but it's just happening all across the league. And I even heard one of the New Orleans Saints reporters, no idea who it was, asking why they ran a speed option with Derek Carr instead of Taysom Hill, which is a very valid point. Like, Taysom Hill is your speed option, back if you're going to run it. But the response was, well, if the play works, which is what every coach says, then, you're looking at this totally different. But Derek Carr, let's see, 2,700 yards, 11 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Jameis has played a little bit, but not a ton. Alvin Kamara, who missed the games, has played in 9 games, has 508 yards. Taysom Hill right behind him with 346 yards. So Taysom Hill is getting involved in the rushing attack, and he always has, which we've seen. Chris Olave, leading receiver, 890 yards. Rashid Shaheed, who torched us a little bit in the first meeting, 534 yards. Michael Thomas, 448 receiving yards. So third leading, receiver on their team. And Alvin Kamara, again, played in 9 games, has 413 receiving yards. Taysom Hill, 229. Like, they have the skill positions on that side of the ball. Very stout defense, similar to what, we kind of talk about with Tampa Bay. I was going back to look at New Orleans. So, yeah, they're giving up around, or they're 16th in the league, probably in the middle of the pack defense, comparing them with everything. Rushing defense is a little bit or not as good as their passing attack. Looking at the comparison between the two, they're in the top 20-ish, sitting at outside of the top 20, I should say, in a lot of categories for their rush defense. And then for their passing attack or their passing defense, they're top 10 in most categories, except their ability to get to the quarterback and actually get sacks. And we know from our side that we can't get pressure. Folks, if you keep seeing me click my phone, if you're watching, it's because I'm checking the time. Time's ticking down. I got about 3 minutes and 16 seconds, which means it's about time to wrap this up. And I can't believe I'm going to, do this and get this under in the time allotted. Want to make sure that I'm able to jump on to the other pod in time. Now, the other thing that I'll probably do, this is just more of like housekeeping, is try to post this conversation that I have on this other pod on my pod. It'll be audio only, potentially. See if I can get the video copy and share it with y'all. But anyways, folks, we got a game. If you're going to tune in, hey, you're a brave soul, because if it were me and I wasn't doing this the way that I'm doing it now, I would have been checked out, or I would check out, and I would not be tuning in to watch this game. But, we'll see. A lot of players on the Panthers staff, not staff, but the players team right now are fighting to be here, fighting to put tape out, whether it's to become a free agent, to be retained by whoever the general manager is, whoever the head coach is. And they keep fighting. Like, they are not going to give up. That is one of the things that Tabor highlighted. I also liked in his presser where he joked, the head official came up to him and said, is there anything I can do for you before the game last week against Tampa? He said, a cheeseburger would be great. Yeah, just having that humor. That's kind of the leadership that Chris Tabor has. And he knows that this is now 5 games left. He'll eventually move on to probably another special teams role in another team, unless he is retained. But I don't see him being retained, not because he's unable to be a good coach, but sitting through 3 staffs. I feel like for him, he's like, all right, I'm ready to get out of here. Just my general consensus. So a minute and 30 seconds to go, which means it's time to make a prediction. Last week, I picked Tampa Bay to win. This week, it is another one of those games where it is winnable. It is a division game. We're traveling. New Orleans is loud. They're going to be up for this game. They're fighting for a playoff spot. And it is going to come down to, is Derek Carr there or not? And are we seeing Jameis Winston? But I think we see a lot of Taysom Hill. We see a lot of Alvin Kamara. Chris Olave, Rashid, and I think New Orleans pulls this out. Panthers continue to lose, and I'll say this, final score. Oh man, Panthers can barely eclipse 18 points. So I'm going to say final score: New Orleans 28, Panthers 20. And as you talk about this losing streak, as I close out this pod, I did pull some data over the last decade. There's been 2 teams that have had 1 loss or fewer. You had the Cleveland Browns twice. They lost 1 game, or won 1 game. Excuse me, I'm saying this wrong. Won 1 game, and then they won 0 games. And that was in back-to-back years. It took them 4 years to get to the playoffs after that. Jacksonville was the most recent example. Jacksonville actually won 1 game, and that was before drafting Trevor Lawrence and all the assets around there. You know what's happened. And then 2 years later, they have now made the playoffs, or 2 years after that, they made the playoffs. So I say all this because it's going to take time. Whoever comes in, whatever happens, and we're going to have all offseason to talk about it. But this is not an overnight thing when you do win 1 game. And there's a lot of pressure for the Panthers to win another game over the last 5 games, because since the schedule's been expanded to 17 games, there's not been a team that's won only 1 game. All right, y'all, it's time for me to bounce, head over to the other pond. I appreciate y'all. Have a good day.